Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Let's make sure you can hear me. All right, very good. It's a beautiful morning, so I know that being in a Zoom event is everyone's favorite thing to be doing, so I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is Engaging the Capital, the latest webinar presented by the Digital Currency Innovation Lab, or DCIL. I'm Ryan Ozawa, and I'm a community engagement consultant with the DCIL. That is a partnership between the State Division of Financial Institutions, the DFI, and the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation, or HTDC. And its mission is to help the state of Hawaii explore economic opportunities brought about by virtual currencies, gather data through participating companies, and help guide legislation. And although that's usually just the word salad we say before these events, it's very important that we are now at the guiding legislation portion of this long and complicated process. But if you want more information on these events, you can always visit the HTDC website at htdc.org and look for DCIL under programs. This event is part of a series of webinars to raise awareness around virtual currencies. But today we're going to hear about where the rubber meets the road, as they say, and where your feedback is as vital as ever. We're going to hear from Virginia Beck. She's the coordinator of the Public Access Room at the Capitol. She has a master's degree in public administration and years of experience in the Public Access Room, 15 years, in fact, and other government, educational, and nonprofit settings. Today, she's going to be covering the basics of the legislative process and how to track bills and prepare and submit testimony. It sounds a lot like you need to eat your vegetables, but again, if you want to make change happen, ranting on social media isn't going to make a difference. Participating is. Before we dive into the session, a couple of reminders. The session is recorded. It'll be sent to everyone participating and to anyone else who wants to catch up after the fact. And you're all welcome to send in questions during the presentation during using the Q&A function, and that's at the lower side of your screen, and we can address them if we have time after Virginia's presentation. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the screen Virginia.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here, Ryan.
Excellent.
So let me go ahead and just get started with my slides and dive right in. So we're going to be talking about participating at the legislature. And as Ryan was saying, it's very important, and not enough people raise their voices. So it's all the more important that you do that, especially on something that's as important as the subject you're focused on. We need to learn more about that here at the legislature. So I'm with the Public Access Room, and we are an office the legislature has set up just to help people participate. And so please don't hesitate to call or email us at any time, and we will help you figure out whether bills are alive or dead, what happens next, what do I do now, what did he just say? All of those sorts of questions, we'll be happy to help. And we are nonpartisan. We don't take a stance on any issue. We're just focused on process. And when the Capitol building is open to the public, we are open to the public as well, and you can use our office as your own while you're at the Capitol. So there's workspace, there are computers, we've got office supplies, the whole bit. And we do lots of workshops and tutorials. So if you have a group that would like to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you would think that every single state in the country would have an office like the Public Access Room, but it turns out only Alaska and Hawaii have such full service offices. So we're lucky about that. So the state legislature is divided into two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Senate has 25 members, House has 51 members serving 2-year terms. What that means is every election cycle, the entire House of Representatives is up for election, and roughly half the Senate is up for election. they're serving 4-year terms. This coming election cycle, it's a little bit different because of reapportionment. The entire Senate is going to be up for election. Some of them running for 2-year terms, some for 4-year terms. So just a reminder of how important it is to vote on the people who are going to be holding these offices. So the state constitution tells us on the third Wednesday in January, you're going to start a new regular legislative session, and it's going to go for up to 60 session days. They call us a part-time legislature because we're only convening in session to consider legislation for part of the year. But the rest of the year, the offices are open, and it's usually a little easier, in fact, to get in touch with legislators during what they call the interim. So never hesitate. We usually start with a big old party on opening day, but because of COVID, that did not happen. Instead, they got right to work and introduced, I think it was close to 2,500 bills in the first week after opening day. So January 26th was the deadline to introduce bills. So a bill is a formal piece of legislation that if it succeeds in the legislative process and gets enacted, it becomes an act of law. And as soon as it's introduced, it gets a bill number. This bill is a House bill. It was introduced by a representative, HB. If it were a senator introducing it, it would be an SB. And then the number is just based on when it hits the clerk's desk. When the bill is drafted, it's given a bill title. This one is relating to transportation, nice and vague. The important thing about a bill title is it can never change, and it has to reflect the content of the legislation. So this bill could be about bicycling, and it could change along the way to be about bicycle lanes. That would still be allowed because it would still be relating to transportation. Now, there has just been some a Supreme Court ruling on the whole practice of gut and replace, which some of you may have heard of, where they take the entire contents of the bill and replace it with new contents, leaving the title alone. But we're going to have to see whether that's still allowed. The Supreme Court says it's not allowed, but to what degree is unclear. Let's see, I just want to mention that a bill, if it's going to have a purpose statement, it'll have it right up front in the first section. Then you'll get into the guts of the bill, which may be changing the revised, the session laws or the HRS, the Hawaii Revised Statutes. Excuse me, I blanked there for a moment. And then at the very end will be a section that says when the law would take effect if it is enacted. Now, a lot has to happen for a bill to become a law. The House and Senate both arrange themselves into different committees on different subject matters, and a bill is going to be referred to one or more committees that it has to go through, and it has to successfully pass through those committees, having hearings where they can hear from the public as to whether or not the legislation is a good idea. At the same time that it's going through the hearing process, it has to go through 3 votes, they call them readings, on the floor of the House and the Senate. And that's really what's required by the Constitution, those 3 readings on the floor of the House and the Senate. So then if it gets through both the House and the Senate, we need to make sure that they agree on the exact wording of the bill that will then go off to the governor, who can sign it into law, allow it to become law without signature, or if the governor vetoes it, there's a mechanism for the House and Senate to override the veto. So that's a lot that has to happen for a bill to become law. And 90% of the bills will not make it. Roughly 10% of the bills make it each year. And the reason they die is because of the deadlines that are set. They're called deadlines because they're designed to kill bills. So what happens is in late December, early January, the speaker, the leaders of the House and the Senate, the speaker and the president, get together and decide on all of the deadlines that are going to guide our lives over the next few months. And we'll see how those work. But yeah, we'll see how those work as we go forward. I just want to point out on the legislature's website, capital.hawaii.gov, you can always find the calendar in the upper left-hand corner. So it's always there for you. And let's just see how this works, how the bill becomes a law. Gets introduced. First reading, no big deal. Everything passes first reading. It's almost as if I, as a House member, think if you as a colleague think this is important enough to write up into a bill, great, put it in the hopper, let's get this thing going. But then you want to watch for what committees your bill needs to go through. It could be referred to just one committee, two committees, three committees, two committees meeting together and then another committee, all kinds of combinations.
You guys have the updated version.
And then you'll want to ask for a public hearing. So this is the step that a lot of people are at right now, where the bills have been referred to committees and there are deadlines coming up. And if the bills are not heard, they're going to die in committee. So you really have to move quickly. Committees are required to give at least 48 hours notice for a hearing. In the Senate, the first time they hear a bill, they need to give 72 hours, and they don't all meet every day. So you really want to get in touch with the chair of the committee to ask for a bill to be heard if you're in favor of it. If you're not in favor of it, you may want to call the chair and say, don't pay attention to this legislation. This is a bad piece of legislation. If if the bill doesn't get heard, as I mentioned, it's going to die in committee. And that is the fate of most bills. Now, there's a lot of duplication. If I get a senator to introduce a bill, it's not uncommon for the senator to find a representative to introduce identical legislation in the other chamber. The idea is that if one of them gets stuck, maybe if the other one can continue, by the time we get back to that spot, we'll have worked something out. So deadlines. On the public access room website that I'll show you in just a moment, there is a wonderful handout called Which Deadlines Apply to My Bill, based on how many committees your bill gets referred to. So the first deadline is coming right up, the triple referral deadline. In fact, it is today that they need to be filed. So if you've got a bill that's been referred to 3 committees, it needs to be getting out of that first committee and into the second to the last committee today. And then we've got a lateral deadline on the 17th, which is next week. That's the deadline to get out of its second to the last committee, or if it's in, second to the last. So if it's only been referred to 2 committees, it's already in its second to the last committee, so it has to get out of that committee by the lateral deadline. And then it has to get out of all of the committees by the decking deadline, which this year is March 4th. So you'll want to sign up for hearing notices so that you don't miss an opportunity to testify. And the first time you use this top row of features on our website, you'll need to register with our website. And I just want to show you on the capital.hawaii.gov website, you can easily find instructions on how to do this by just going to the links and then to the public access room page and then selecting Engagement 101. And there we've got, how to register for an account, how to sign up for hearing notices, track bills, all kinds of things. Back to capital.hawaii.gov. Once we sign in, we have orange buttons. We'll click on hearing notification and then just put in the bill number that if it comes up for a hearing, you want to be sent an email notice so that you don't miss a chance to testify. Now, in addition, you may want to sign up by committee. And so that anytime a particular committee has a hearing, they send you a notice, say Commerce Consumer Protection. I want to know every time they have a hearing so I can glance through and make sure, okay, this one's about dentists, I don't care about that. This one, oh wait, this one's about banking, I do care about that. Let me go ahead and investigate the bill and see if I want to offer testimony. And you can change it really easily. Here's what it looks like in your inbox. Not a very pretty piece of mail, just has links. And then you'll open the hearing notice and there'll be instructions for testimony at the end of the notice, usually saying that you need to offer testimony within 24 hours of it, of the hearing itself. So if a bill does get scheduled for a public hearing, you'll want to offer testimony. And you can type this up ahead of time and save it on your computer, or you can just use the web form. And it doesn't need to be really long and complicated. Make sure you've got the bill number, make sure you've said who you are, they don't accept anonymous testimony, and then really clearly make it pop out whether you're in support or opposed to the piece of legislation, and then why. Where are you coming from? Are you an expert? That's great if you are, but maybe you just have a story for how this affects your life. That's great. You want to keep it short. A page testimony is really ideal if you can get it down to that. And then you'll use the web form. And this is also how you'll request the opportunity to address the committee over Zoom. So what you'll do is you'll sign into the website and the buttons turn orange and you'll click on testimony and you'll put in the bill number and click on continue. And then this form comes up, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So it's got the hearing information, and it's got my name. Now, if I'm going to request a Zoom link, then I want to make sure that this full name matches my Zoom identity, because that's how they're going to check to see whether they're going to let me in the room or not. And then whether you support or oppose the legislation, whether you're testifying as an individual or in this case on behalf of an organization, and then whether you're just doing written testimony or whether you also want to do Zoom. If you're not sure, well, I might want to say something, but I'm not really sure, go ahead and say, do the Zoom option so that you've got that option. It's not a problem if you don't show up. They'll just read your name and that'll be it. And then you can just choose your file or upload it from your computer, much like you upload a document to your email. If you don't feel like, or if you're getting other people to testify and you think that's one step too many to ask them to do, fine. Instead, they can just go ahead and type their testimony into the testimony comments box. And there are some features where you can bold and underline and all of that kind of thing. So when you're done, you'll just make sure to click on submit. And then if I've just submitted written testimony, I'd be all done. It would just say, here's the bill number, here's the hearing, and I submitted written testimony. If I also requested Zoom, it'll say Zoom requested. And then what happens is that a few hours before the hearing, this Zoom requested is going to morph into a join button. So what will happen when hearing time comes is you'll sign into the website, you'll click on the testimony button again, you'll find that green box with the join button, click on it, you'll be in Zoom land. You want to keep your chat panel open so the administrators can talk to you and let you know if there are any special instructions. You'll want to mute your mic, turn off your video. They'll ask you to start up your video, call your name, then you'll unmute your mic and say, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm here in strong support of blah, 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 blah. Sometimes there will be a time limit, especially with these Zoom meetings. They seem to be quite strict with the time frames that the meetings can go in. So sometimes they've limited them to as little as 1 minute. So if you are going to do Zoom, I would recommend that you come up with your 1-minute elevator speech to start off your testimony, and that way you'll get your important point in, and then you can elaborate with as much time as they give you. Now, if you want to watch the hearing, but you're not on Zoom testifying, you can do that by clicking on the hearings button. And what will come up is a list of all the upcoming hearings that day, and you can click on the YouTube link. And that's a new feature that's really nice, that you can watch everything that's going on. If, say, there was a hearing this morning, I was busy with other things, I want to see what happened, I can go to the live and on-demand video button and just choose whichever YouTube channel is appropriate, whether it was a House or a Senate event, and find the event that way. Now, sometimes after a hearing and all of the testimony, sometimes they'll vote right away or decide to hold the bill right away, but often they'll defer the decision-making to another date. And they can do a few different things. They could pass the bill without any changes, exactly as is. They could pass it with changes, or they could defer it and say, you know what, now is not the time for this bill to go forward. We're going to defer the bill and not do anything with it. In that case, the bill is going to die in committee. Now, two things. Who gets to decide which path to go down? That would be the chair of the committee once again. And the members usually go along with the chair. The other thing you'll note is there's not an option of vote to not pass the bill. That's because it's very rarely done. They're very polite about the way they kill legislation at the Capitol. Instead, they just defer it quietly, and the deadlines come and the deadlines go, and your bill is stuck in the committee. So changes could be very minor or significant. That bill title that never changes is what constrains how much the bill can change. Two common changes that I just want to alert you to is they may put in a crazy effective date at the end of the bill. And they're doing that not with any intention of the bill going off to the governor like that, but to ensure that it goes into conference at the end of session so that the chairs will have another chance to get their hands on the bill. The other thing you'll notice is if there's an appropriation in your bill, it's not uncommon for them to blank that out. They want to keep a certain dollar figure associated with it. They will make note of it in the committee report that accompanies the bill as it moves forward out of a committee. So the committee report will summarize any changes that are being made to the bill and will indicate what the next step is for the bill. And I just want to go to a bill status page. So if on the home page, if I put in SB 756, this is what would come up. This has everything that ever happened to the bill is going to appear down here under the status. So we can see it was referred and re-referred, scheduled for a hearing, then they deferred it for decision making, then they passed it with amendments, then it took about 3 days for them to issue the report, and away it went. And you can always find the most current version of the bill up at the top. This is going to be an HTML version, and then there's also a PDF version. The important thing about the PDF version is it does have the page and line numbers, which is really helpful if you're trying to recommend changes. You could say page 3, lines 21 through 24 should be changed this way. Makes it nice and easy. If you want to look at past versions of the measures, you can find them over on the right. Committee reports are going to summarize how one version has changed to the next. And then testimony, all of the written testimony that was submitted is going to be listed on the testimony links. So after they've heard the bill in committee and they've passed it forward, it's going to come back to the floor for a second reading or a second vote. Now, when the second reading happens is not set in stone, depending on how many committees the bill has to go through. So all 51 members of the House would convene if this were a House bill, or all 25 members of the Senate if this was a Senate bill. And if they vote to move it forward, then we get to do it again. Ask for it to be heard at the next committee, offer testimony at the next committee, and repeat as needed. We've got to get through all of the committees by the decking deadline, which this year is March 4th. And then we need to get through the third reading vote by the first crossover deadline. And there's a constitutional requirement that says they need to give the legislators 48 hours notice that they are being asked to vote on a bill for the third or final time. And so you'll see that on the status sheet. Sometimes it'll say 48 hours notice, March 8th. That means on March 8th, they're going to be asked to vote on the bill. So first crossover deadline means that, well, before I go on, I just want to mention sometimes there is a bit of controversy over a bill, and you may want to advocate to the entire chamber for those floor votes. And there are emails that you can send that go to all representatives and all senators, or you can get people to call and email their own legislators to ask them to vote in the way you'd like them to. And then after first crossover, all the bills that have made it through the House are going to cross over and go to the Senate, and all the bills that have gone through the Senate are going to cross over and go through the House. So at this point, only about 25% of the bills are going to make it to this point. 75% of the bills will be dead by first crossover. So if we look at a picture of how a bill becomes a law in Hawaii, say we have a House bill, it gets introduced, gets referred to committee, or passes first reading, gets referred to committees, starts to go through the committee process, second reading, any final hearing, third reading, crosses over to the Senate, and now goes through the same process on the Senate side. And they've got deadlines for triple, for lateral, for decking on the second half of session as well. And it's got to get the third reading vote by the second crossover deadline. And again, they'll need to have 48 hours notice that they're going to be voting on that. So we made it down through the House, down through the Senate. Now we come to this kind of complicated part. And what happens is the bill gets returned to the chamber that it started with. So for example, if there's a House bill, it's gone through the House, crossed over to the Senate. While it was in the Senate, it got changed. So the Senate transmits it back to the House in its changed version. The House says, okay, it's been changed. We disagree with the changes, and then we go into the conference process. Now, there is an option for them to agree to the changes, but that rarely happens. One of the legislators has to make a positive move to say, in this case, we want to agree, but it's not very common. And sometimes the bills will be returned without having been changed, in which case there's no problem. They can just go off to the governor. But usually they'll go into this conference process if they make it to this point. And the House leadership will name members to a conference committee on this bill, and the Senate leadership will name members to a conference committee on this bill, and they will meet and try to figure out what the final version of the bill should be. And if there's any monetary implication, they'll need to get the blessing from the money committees. And they'll have to do this by the final decking deadline. So, and there's no guarantee, bills can die here. So they could, the conferees could not be appointed. They could be appointed and then not meet. They could meet and not come to a decision. There is no testimony at this point. This is really a time for the legislators to talk with one another about what makes sense, considering all the pieces of legislation that have made it to this point. When you advocate, you'll be talking to the conferees as well as anyone else that you've developed a relationship with, quite frankly. So they can do a few different things. They could pass a bill with changes, a conference draft, by the deadline, the final decking deadline. Or the original chamber could say, you know, after looking at all of this, we're going to agree to the changes that you made in the other chamber, and we're going to bring it to our folks and go ahead and vote on it and get it off to the governor. Or it can die without agreement by the deadline. And then it's not just up to the conferees as to whether this is a good piece of legislation. Every legislator in the House and the Senate has to have had an opportunity to vote on the final version of the bill that is going to go off to the governor. And this has to happen by the end of session, which this year is easy to remember because it's Cinco de Mayo. You wouldn't quite be done yet. Then the governor has a set of deadlines that takes him into mid-July, by which he needs to either sign the bill into law, allow it to become law without signature, or veto the bill. If he vetoes the bill, the legislature can either change the bill to accommodate the concerns of the governor and bring it back to the governor, and then he can sign it, which is what happened last year. Very rare, but it does happen. Or if he vetoes it, the House and the Senate can reconvene, and if they get a 2/3 vote in each chamber, they can override the veto and the bill will become law. And if you made it in one session, you would be pretty stoked. It takes some time to teach the legislature, to identify your allies, to find out who's against this legislation and why it might not be a good idea. So sometimes you're a little disappointed at the end of session, but if you had hearings and you developed relationships and you furthered discussion on your issue, that's a good thing, and we would urge you not to give up, to get ready for the next year's session. And it's actually a 2-year session, so we're in the second year of a 2-year session. So at the end of this session, all of the bills that haven't passed out of the legislature are going to die. We're going to have new elections, and then next year they're going to start a new 2-year cycle of legislation. And I just want to mention before I go about how to find bills. There are 2 primary search spots. You've got the keyword search and the subject search. So on the capital.hawaii.gov website, you'll use the keyword search, and I just put in the word digital, and up came all of these things. I can make it just digital currency if I want by clicking on that. That'll narrow it down. If I want to narrow it down some more, I can use this little filter and just say, okay, I only want to see whatever documents have been produced in the last month. And then I'll click in and out of these status buttons to look at the description of the bill to see if it's the one I'm looking for or one I want to keep track of. There is duplication in this. It's going to find every version of the bill or testimony that was delivered on a bill. But that's just the way it is. And it looks through the entire content of the bill. The other way to find bills is to use the Reports and Lists button on the home page. And there you can go to Subject Search, and a little search bar will pop up that will search the descriptions of the measures, the bill titles, and the keywords. And if I put in the phrase digital currency, up come these 4 bills. So it's not quite as far-reaching as the keyword search, but sometimes it's exactly what you need to find what you're looking for. If you can't find it anywhere, you know who to talk to, the public access room. We're very happy to help you with all of your questions. And on our website, I want to point out the current legislature page, is where you will find lists of everything from committee schedules to the which deadlines apply to my bill handout, to the room, phone, fax, email list of all the legislators. Lots of good information in there about the current legislative session. And of course, the Engagement 101 is where you find the instructions on bill tracking and signing up for hearing notices and signing up for or offering testimony. And you can subscribe to our newsletter list on the newsletter tab. And can't emphasize enough, if we can be of any help, we'd be happy to. We can save you time, frustration, all that kind of thing. That's all I've got for today. And I hope somebody has some good questions to ask. We're very happy to invite you to engage. Really, not enough people get involved in the legislative process. So it's really important for you to add your voice. So that's all I've got, and I'll turn it back over to Ryan.
Thank you, Virginia. I really appreciated that. I mean, I have been, thanks to my work with the HTDC, the DCIL, been involved in the process, and I still learned a lot.
Oh, good.
So,
good.
And, you know, my daughter is working at the Capitol this session, and she comes home with stories and everything. And I again, it is not, when you pulled up the schematic with all of the circles and arrows and stuff, I'm like, wow. It's quite a bit. So thank you so much for your presentation. I know we have at least one question, and I have several, if you don't mind. So EO did ask a question that I think you answered, which was when you see a bill that says, be it enacted on January 1st, 2199, like 2 centuries from now. So that's just, it's not a statement on the worthiness of the bill. It's basically a blank.
Exactly. What they're doing is they're making sure that the bill isn't going to go off. Nobody wants the bill to go to the governor that way. So it's going to have to be changed into a more realistic date. And it's going to force the bill to go to the conference process. So, and usually the members of the conference are going to be the chairs of the committee that the bills have already gone through. So they know they'll get a chance to talk with the chairs of the other chamber to figure out all the fine details of the bill. And at that point, they'll correct the effective date. We sometimes call those dates defective effective dates.
Like we're forcing ourselves to return to this. It's not
Exactly.
going to exist into law.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. I did want to point out, yes, I have on the screen here, these are the remaining surviving bills for cryptocurrency, just in case you might want to track them and sign up on the website and get hearing notices and testify. There are 2 bills, each have a counterpart bill on the other side. So as Virginia mentioned, a slightly better chance of making it through that enormous gauntlet of massive and constant ways to die. So there's a bill from the Division of Financial Industries. That one passed yesterday, but was deferred in the Senate. It passed the House, but you know, again, there's a chance. That's HB 2108 and SB 3076. And the other pair of bills is SB 2697 and HB 2287. That's to just completely exclude exchanges from the Money Transmitter Act, which is the current regulatory regime that is being used to regulate digital currency in Hawaii. And that one was passed by one committee in the Senate, but it is waiting to be scheduled in the House. But again, doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to make it, but it's a little harder that way. There were 3 other bills. They were all deferred by their committees this week. And I really liked how you said, Virginia, that that's just sort of the polite way of letting them die. It's like, we're not going to take a vote and say no, because that would hurt someone's feelings, but we're just going to put it aside. That's fascinating.
That's it. So okay. I was wondering if you'd like, I can show you how to set up a measure tracking list. I don't know if that's something that your audience might be interested in.
Sure, that might work if you just take HB 2108 maybe and track that.
Okay, let me find my. Okay. So you can see my screen, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to sign into my website and I'll click on the measure tracking button.
Mhm.
Now I've already got some lists set up, but I'll just say digital currency and I'll create my list. And then I'll click on show list. It says it's empty. I want to add some bills to it, and I can put in more than one at a time by just separating them with commas.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
I know, it's a nice feature. I wish it happened all over the thing. If I wanted to, I could add notes, you know, say this is the one I want to see forward, that kind of thing. And then I just generate the report. And up comes all of the bills that I'm interested in. And if I had a nice long list and wanted to see, well, what happened since yesterday, I could double click on the current status header and it'll sort my report by date of
Ah,
last action. So I can easily see it brings to the top, okay, they passed it with amendments, so I'm waiting for the HD1 version of that bill. And this one deferred, this one passed with the amendments, I'm waiting for the SD1 version, and this one, if I want it to live, they'll have to schedule it in the CPC committee by the 17th.
thank you, Virginia. And actually,
Sure.
I was going to say, I've been using this website for years. I didn't even see those filter buttons that you showed us a few screens back. So
Oh,
even
okay.
though
Yeah.
as a web designer, you might pull your hair out at the way this website looks, there's a lot that it can do. So it's very impressive in that respect. I did have other questions. If there are none in the chat, let me double check. No, okay. You did mention that you can contact your representatives to give attention to a bill, and in many cases it's the chair, right, of a committee.
Right.
It sounds to me like and especially if you read the news article yesterday, there's a lot of power embodied in that position, because even if it gets referred to a committee, the committee doesn't need to bring it up. So a lot of the contacting I did this year and every year is to basically contact that individual chair and say, please schedule this for a hearing.
Exactly. That's one of the frustrations sometimes when people call our office in mid-February and say, I'm waiting for the opportunity to give testimony on this bill. And it's like, well, you really had some advocacy to do before that, asking for the hearing.
Yeah.
That's an important step.
But I mean, I mean, watching sessions, committee sessions, they move very quickly, but they do get to a vote, and there is still an opportunity for an up or down vote from members. So certainly if you have a representative on a committee and you want to make sure that that's a yes vote or a no vote, you should get in touch with them as well. About the public access room, is it open during the pandemic, even though the Capitol is not open?
Yes, we are open. We're open from 7:45 in the morning until 6 p.m. at night. And we're available by phone or email. And we're happy to do Zoom. So if someone is really having a hard time with the website, we can do a Zoom and share our screen and show people. But we do a lot over email and phone.
It's amazing that this isn't, like you said, only 2 states have a fully staffed room like this. And I didn't even know that you had hours before and after work hours. I always, I figured if I had to work 9 to 5, I wouldn't be able to come down, but you have a little bit of time in the morning and a little bit of time in the evening.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And someone is asking if they can have a copy of the schematic, and go ahead and email me at par@capitol.hawaii.gov. I'll put that into the chat box. And we will be happy to send you a copy of it. And we even have a little, the handout has on the other side, sorry about the caps, that was my fumble fingers. The other side has a maze that you can do on how a bill becomes a law. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I remember the I Am a Bill on Capitol Hill from Schoolhouse Rock, but it sounds more like a horror movie. You got to get through the haunted house to come out the other side. When people are advocating for a bill, they will often say, here's some sample testimony you can use. And then I find that the end result of that is usually a testimony packet that's 30 copies of the exact same message.
Right.
Does that is that good, bad? Are people just happy that 30 people decided to do that and walk through that website and everything?
Yeah, well, the way I think to think about it is if they're going to cut and paste testimony, then it's equivalent to handing in a petition. Say, this is what we say, and this many people signed it. So the clerks will very quickly see that it's form testimony and put it all together, and we'll let the chair know, okay, 120 people sent in form testimony.
But I do know that they do, if it's not like 30 pages, that they do read it, because I do, as you recommend, put stories in my testimony, how I'm personally impacted. And I've actually heard back, like, oh, I just wanted to let you know that struck a note with me. So, that is encouraging, that when you see them on screen, just sort of flipping through those binders, that, they'll read it sometimes.
That's right. That's right. One thing I want to mention about testimony is it is public. So, and you don't put your address unless you want your address to be published on the website. To just put your community itself would be, Kapa'a, Hawaii. That's good enough. And the YouTube thing, you just want to make sure that you don't have any copyrighted material on your screen behind you, because then they'll kick you off. And
like a Star Trek. Like a Star Trek logo or something.
Exactly. And you can't testify while driving. So you need to be parked. They had to make that rule, unfortunately, because people were trying to testify while driving.
That's something. New rules. Actually, I do have a structural question. You said something about money committees. Like, I do know that if any bill is eventually going to cost money, and many of them do, if it doesn't go to the money committees, it's essentially not going to succeed because nobody's decided to allocate funds to it. Is that correct? What are the money committees?
Yeah, so finance on the House side and Ways and Means on the Senate side are the money committees. And if a bill has financial implications or an appropriation, it's going to be referred to those committees. And you can pretty much count on it. It's very, I don't know of any that don't get referred to the committees. So they have to survive those committees first off. And then when it comes to conference, they need to get the final blessing and get those blanks filled in from the money committees that, yes, we've done the budget, we have the money to fund this program or that line item. And that all happens right when we come up to the final decking deadline.
Excellent. I know I've always heard WAM, Ways and Means. I forgot about the finance on the other side. Fantastic. I do want to mention, you did talk about personal contact information in your testimony. I'm one of the people that figured that up the hard way. So, my testimony is always on letterhead, and I'm trained in the old school way with your address and everything. So although I've been working very hard to scrub my personal cell phone number off the internet, there are two places where they'll never disappear, and it's on the state capitol website because of testimony I gave a long time ago. But on the other hand, I found searching that testimony a great way to find contact information of other members of the community.
Yes, it's a great way to find people who might be potential allies, to see if they're aware of a certain piece of legislation that's going on, and see if you can't get them out and testifying.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's all the questions that I have. I do want to reemphasize that you talked about this is a process that also is for educating legislators. They're not all engineers or water resource specialists or anything like that. So it takes time for them to come around to understanding how important an issue might be. The DFI, the Division of Financial Industries, has been promoting bills since 2015, so 7 years, right? And this is a year, do or die, for cryptocurrency. But it is encouraging because more and more of the legislators now at this point can converse in the topic. So I do like what you said. It might not happen for your bill for something you want to get done this year or even the next year, but it's that that having that diligence and being persistent, that eventually you do educate the legislators and the community about why a topic is important. So don't lose faith. You're right that, like you said, 75% die already at that first cutoff.
Right.
It's a tough world out there for a bill. So, okay. Well, without any further questions, I think we are good. I do want to thank you, Virginia, for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for
And
having me.
I do plan to come down and visit you. I think that'll be, as a person who's interested in public records, open data, I consider you part of that same set of resources to make government accessible and transparent. And I think it's very important. A quick reminder, the session was recorded. We'll share you that link when you, later today or tomorrow. And please refer other people to it if you found it valuable, as I think many of you did. And again, this is part of a series, so keep an eye on the DCIL page at htdc.org, or even better, I'd recommend you sign up for the HTDC email to get the latest news about what that very important organization is doing for the community. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you again, Virginia, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Aloha.
Aloha.